morning, everybody. Early morning start for us today. Super pumped and excited to have our guests on that we have today, but also super pumped and excited again to talk to Sandy. How are you doing?
Hey, Rob, I'm amazing. How are you doing today?
I'm very, very good. It's rainy season here in Costa Rica, so I'm getting most of the time it's sunny in the morning, but today it's raining. And actually it was raining really hard when I woke up, so I was a little concerned that you guys wouldn't even be able to hear me over that, but seems to have calmed down enough that we can proceed with the show, so we're all good.
Well, are you getting ready for your group coming down there soon? Will it be rainy season still?
No, of course not.
Okay.
It's designed to be beautiful and sunny every day, so I've got that planned out. If the rain comes, it won't be because I called it. But no, it's supposed to be, around mid-November is when the rain will just disappear, and then it doesn't come back for months. So if you see any rain in there, usually it's like, a little sprinkle or something like that. Mid-January, maybe there'll be something like that. But other than that, it's, there's no rain here for months once it stops. It's an interesting climate.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, gearing up for the event. We've closed it off. I mean, obviously, if somebody calls and says that they want to come, I guess we can arrange that, but we've closed it off. I've got 8 people coming this year, so it should be good. Should be fun. And keep you posted on how it goes. And start planning for the next one, of course.
Any idea on the type of projects or real estate you're looking at?
Yeah. We're going to be seeing a bunch of condo projects in Las Catalinas, which is a beach town. It's a walkable beach town. It's around 20 minutes north of where I am. It's really cool. It's unique. It's sort of European inspired, and they're doing a whole new expansion, like double what they've got there now, and that's just starting. So we're going up there. Really cool condo project right at the top of the hill in Tamarindo, but still like walkable to everything, called La Vista. Yeah, we've got some cool stuff planned. It's going to be fun.
Awesome.
What about you? What's going on?
What's going on? We're doing a whole bunch of stuff. We just did a few renovation projects finishing off and refinancing, which we haven't done a little bit in a while. So it'll be interesting. I haven't been that active in the last couple of years. If I'm not sure how much I've shared about that, but we've been working on revamping our portfolio in some ways, and so this will be like the first refinance project in almost like in this weird higher interest environment. So we'll see how that goes. I think low expectations for what that'll look like, but it's okay. It's been a good project regardless. So it'll work out. Not a classic Burr example. A little different. But other than that,
still able to move forward. That's what you're doing, right?
For sure.
Climate sort of shifting what things look like, but still advancing.
There's always there's never a market where you can't make deals happen. There's always something to do. The numbers shift or the strategies shift a little bit, but there's always an opportunity. There's lots of opportunities coming actually that we're seeing now, starting to get some people in some tricky situations that they need help out of, which is opportunistic if you're ready to take action on it.
Awesome. Actually, there is one more thing that I want to mention. One of our lenders, one of my clients just bought a boutique hotel here, a 16-room hotel, and right at the last minute, we got in with a new lender with Banco Nacional here in Costa Rica, and we were able to get her 80% LTV. So
which
that
is super rare, right?
That is unheard of here. And just speaking with the lender, it looks like we're going to be able to continue to do that. So it's new ground. It's opening up a lot of doors, because before that it was 50 to 60% LTV. So this is really exciting. It's gonna be a game changer, I think, for anyone looking here.
Nice.
Yeah, so excited about that. That's one of the big things. But anyway, let's move on. Oh, I should say, everyone listening should go over to breakthrough.reipodcast.ca. download our free gift. And what is that free gift, Sandy?
The ultimate strategy for building wealth through real estate. So once they pick that up, of course, you will get access to everything else that we got going on, updates on events like Rob's tour there in Costa Rica coming up, and whatever else we got going on. You won't miss out on a show or anything else. So get on that list. Investors Club events, which we've got a great one coming up actually it'll be probably coming out. Actually, it'll be probably the day that this show airs. I think might be the day of that event. So if you're listening,
which is when?
November 15th. So November 15th evening, we've got a great event. If you're listening and this just came out, so you're gonna still be able to join us.
Go to the event.
Go to the event. Vaughn Investors Club. We got a great event on capital raising, which will be we've got a great guest speaker coming out for it, who's going to talk all about how to raise funds. And they've got some of their students that have come out that have done it through their programs and stuff. It's going to be pretty cool. It's got some great strategies.
Yeah, but you do it every month, right?
We do it every month, yeah.
So around December 15th, probably somewhere around there.
Give or
whatever
take.
What day? Wednesday?
Yeah. Third Wednesday of every month is typically it. December might be a little different.
Right.
But if you've never been out, super easy to access, just above the 407 in the GTA, near Vaughan Mills. And we'd love to see some more faces there. We've got a lot of our listeners show up there and always are in attendance, so it's great to see. But there's room for some more, so come out and join us.
Do you have a website for that?
VaughnInvestorsClub.com.
Right on. And I guess go over to iTunes, give us a rating and review. Help us get out there and reach more of the people that want to hear this kind of content.
Absolutely. Housekeeping done?
Yeah, housekeeping is complete.
Okay.
I put the broom back in the closet.
Okay. Well, we've got some great guests lined up here, so let's bring them onto the show. Thanks so much for being here, David and Anuja.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Good morning.
Hey guys, thanks for having us.
I'll do a little brief intro of you for our listeners who don't know you yet. David and Anuja Pereira. Again, so thankful for you to be here. And I'll let you kind of fill in a bunch of these gaps and share a little more about who you are and what you've done. But your venture into real estate investing, from what I understand, started in 2013 with a triplex. And it looks like you've done a lot since then and gone on to start various types of investments, including some rent-to-own programs that we're going to talk about. And you've bought some properties in a few different areas too, right? Kitchener, Cornwall. You invested passively in some projects, so we can maybe touch on that a little bit. Other investments like the infinite banking strategy. You've done quite a bit in the investment world. So I'm looking forward to learning all about this and what your experience has been and how we can help others learn from your decade plus of experience in this space. So thanks you for being here, guys. And let's get into it and learn a little bit more about what you've been up to in your 10 plus years of investing.
Sure. So I can get started with, we started, as you said, Sandy, 2013, triplex. I guess looked for the hardest thing first. I don't know if we would have started that way, knowing what we know now.
But certainly
not the hardest, correct.
Yeah. Most
yeah, so it was a 100-year home in near Gage Park in Hamilton. We had done market analysis. I went to a RAIN meeting in 2012, which is where I kind of got the bug for this, for real estate. Took about a year or so to get action, although I was sort of dependent on Anuja buying into that, and I'll let her maybe tell that story a bit later. But I had to convince her for sure. But we plunged in with in 2013 with a triplex in Hamilton, 100 years old. We were, the price was good. It was like $272. And then when we did the inspection, I think we got 9,000 back. So we were in for 263 and sold it 6 years later at double. In those 6 years though, learned a lot. And there was just all this stuff that happens when you're managing tenants, when you have a 100-year-old property. So it was a good learning ground for us, and it kind of taught us what we like and what we don't like about real estate investing as well.
Interesting. So you were saying that there was a lot involved in getting started, like in getting things off the ground. But so it sounds to me like you had the bug first, and
Yes.
and then had to sort of convince Anuja into it. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did you even get started in the idea of it, David?
My parents, so back when I was a kid, my parents owned a kind of a convenience store, and then there was an apartment on top, and they had renters. They used to complain about it though. For them, they were people who, I mean, yes, they liked the additional revenue, but it was more headaches. But I always thought there was something there, and then didn't really take action for a long time. Out of university, I was working, and I think I was always looking for some sort of side hustle, side income, some way to make more and to do more. Tried a variety of things that didn't really stick. Came across probably a RAIN ad at some point. I remember attending my first RAIN conference in 2012, and I was blown away by the size of that community and kind of what you learn. And that sort of then got me into more Don Campbell books. So just tons of reading. I don't know if there were good podcasts back then, but I remember trying to find different avenues just to kind of explore real estate further. And all the while, we met in 2012. So the same year I went to that RAIN conference. I was kind of like coming home from those things and all excited and just sort of jacked up to like, hey, let's do something. And my risk averse soon to be wife was sort of just nodding slowly and kind of wondering if this phase would pass too.
Well, I think what happens with something like that, right, is I don't know if it's uniform across all relationships like this, but it seems to me like one person gets all excited, and then when the questions that they have can be answered, that's when things like start to ease up, right? So if you go in and you're like, let's do this, let's buy something, and then you go, how does that look? I don't know, but let's just do it.
Let's just do it.
Fly, right? Yeah. So it's like when you come home from these conferences and you've got answers, or like it will go, well, how does that work? And then you explain it. That eases the tensions, and obviously that person wasn't at the conference with you, so maybe she start to attend these things beforehand, or no, you didn't?
I didn't. You know what? David would come back jazzed, right? David gets jazzed up about stuff, excited. And like he said, I would be like, this will pass, just like the other thing, it'll go away. And I mean, like David said, I was really risk averse. So I was a teacher for 17 years. I grew up in an immigrant family. I was told, like, you get a good job, you make money, you get a pension potentially, and you don't get any debt. You pay off your mortgage as quickly as possible, and don't owe money to anybody. And so the idea of taking another mortgage just didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand the idea of good debt at the time, and it took a lot of education, a lot of me probing. And even when David had answers, he would give me good answers, and I was still so skeptical. I just didn't understand that leveraging ourselves more, but making more money through it. Like, I didn't want to pay more interest. Like, I just didn't like that idea at all. And so it took a while. And even after we bought that first property, it came with its headaches. We had to redo the stairs. The upstairs was like a $15,000, and I just kept calling it a money pit. I think I called it a money pit until the day we sold it for, that large profit. I was just continued to be skeptical. I kept thinking, like, I just didn't understand, I guess, is what it came down to. And it took David being really patient. If there's anyone out there who's trying to convince a spouse, it took a lot of patience, and it took me time to really get comfortable with the idea of, again, leveraging ourselves more. I had questions about, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to do this? And even when he had answers, I needed a bit of time, because those ideas of bad debt and not owing money and paying off things as quickly as possible was ingrained in me since I was a child. So it took time, and there's days where it's still uncomfortable, to be honest. But I continue to work through it, and listening to podcasts like yours and other success stories, those are things that helped me.
Very common for couples to be a little bit like not fully aligned right away in that sense, because it's often what attracts complementary characteristics, right? So it's someone's a little more risk averse, then the other one's a little more maybe out there entrepreneurial and whatnot, and that usually has some sort of a challenge that eventually happens when you're starting to take action like this, right? So I'm glad you shared some of that experience, because I know there's lots of my wife and I have gone through that as well, and you know, Rob probably is the same, and
Oh,
others. So
It sounds like they're telling our story too. You know?
yeah. What about friends, parents, that sort of thing? How did that impact the decision making there at the beginning? Because, like you said, you know, you're brought up in an environment. Usually, wherever we are today, we're a product of our past experiences, and often all the way back to childhood. There's lots of things really deeply ingrained in us. What did friends, family, and their input? How did that impact things?
You know, my parents had some investment properties when we were growing up, but it was not really something that I understood fully. They had bought a condo in London on a tip from an uncle, and it just sort of sat there. They were really passive about it. They paid a property manager. Like, they weren't very active. They owned an extra property where we grew up in Cornwall, and you know, it wasn't a big conversation. We didn't talk about it. I knew they had these places, but we didn't really talk about it. You know, once we started doing it, I think they trusted David's excitement about it, at least my parents. You know, they trusted that we were making good choices. We were older when we started investing. So I think there was a trust factor. We both had steady jobs at the time. But you know what I think is really interesting to me is when I think back at that time, I didn't have any friends talking about investing, right? Like, once we joined the community, I realized there are so many people doing so many things. And it almost felt like a secret at the time, like something that we were not to talk about. It was kind of, you know, taboo to talk about trying to make more money. And I didn't realize that there were so many people doing things until we started the conversation. Like, it was almost like once we started asking questions, it's like all these people came out from the woodwork saying, I have an investment property, or, you know, I've invested in these REITs, you know, like, we just didn't know. And I think, again, it was some of that programming of it's impolite to talk about this stuff. And the realization is our network has changed so much now. But at the time, we didn't really, David had some friends through his MBA that, you know, he would talk to a little bit about investing, but it has grown exponentially since that time by digging ourselves into the community.
Yeah, my dad said headache. When I first told him that we were looking at buying a property, his first word back to me was headache. And he was thinking back to his experience 15, 20 years ago with tenants. This is a Peterborough in the 1990s, who didn't pay rent. And his tenant profile, well, I don't think he even knew what a tenant profile was back then, right? And he never had any sense of training on what to do. Whereas I tried to sort of alleviate his concerns without really getting into too much of an argument about it, because I'm also somewhat stubborn. I was going to move ahead anyway. Mm-hmm. But I also knew that I was working with a really good realtor, and I had gone to RAIN. I had read the book. So I was going into this with an advantage of some knowledge and education that he did not have. So I was confident that we'd be able to pull it off. At the end, he was probably right. It was a headache, or there were a lot of headaches that we encountered that we didn't expect. But again, I wouldn't trade that experience, because then it sort of acted as a board to the next level.
Well, I mean, if you start your own business, that's a headache as well. But people do it all the time. They just don't look at it the same way. Well, this is a business, but I'm saying, like, in the traditional sense of starting a business, right? Like, and of course it's going to be a headache. It absolutely is going to be a headache. That's why. So you're expecting no bumps in the road. You just want smooth sailing while you know, no matter what you do, that's not going to be the case.
Yep.
So I do find that is often what people say, and the things that you hear around a water cooler at work before you decide to start investing is everyone tells you, don't do it. Don't do it. You know, and that's and there may be those people in the woodwork that are sitting on the other side of the room, and they're not saying anything because they've got, like you said, there's 7 people around you saying don't do it. One guy over in the corner that has done it and it's just keeping his mouth shut. But until you do, like you said, go to those places where, you know, there's common ground, like the investment clubs and things like that, you aren't going to meet those people, most likely. It's a small group.
You know what, though, I
Right.
have found, Rob, by being a little more vulnerable in social situations and work situations, is people are more apt to start talking now, right? Like, I think starting the conversation, you definitely don't get it at the same concentration as you do at one of these meetings, but there are people out there, I think, who do want to talk about it. And I think there are opportunities. Like, we've started conversations, and I think someone has to do it, right? To be that person to say the uncomfortable thing, to get the conversation going and not make it taboo, right?
I mean,
Oh,
also
yeah.
when you start doing it more, right? You start even just one-off little convos leads to, you're going to attract more people to do it around you, and you're going to end up in that group, like unintentionally maybe, but you're going to end up in that surrounding over time, as you continually take action and do more things.
It says here. It says here, Anuja wouldn't invest until you guys were married.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it was a bit of a forcing function.
Well,
Um,
see, the other side of that, Anuja,
I
is
wouldn't
that
quite call our marriage a forcing function, but
it was a shotgun wedding.
you know what? It was actually. David proposed to me in March, and we were due to have the big, huge Indian wedding in December. And we ended up starting looking at properties. And once we wanted to close on one, I was like, not until a ring is on this finger. So we had a secret wedding in David's parents' backyard, and it allowed us to buy that first triplex.
See, in a way, you could have just let him do it. Had all of the, the onus on him.
He
Seen
needed
how it went
me.
No.
and then you
I needed the
I'm outta
co-signer.
here, and it went back.
No, so 2 reasons I married her. She was a teacher, so the great benefits. And then number 2, I needed a co-signer on the house. So
Great love story. Great love story.
yeah.
I'm sure there's been some other.
They'll write books someday about this.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about that first experience. You talk about it being basically a buy and hold style property, and we've talked a little bit about the challenges there. Sounds like there was a decent cash windfall at the end of it.
Yep.
But can you talk about the experience there? It's a kind of a classic triplex sort of small multifamily investment for someone to start out with. It's fairly, from what I see, fairly typical starting grounds. What did you learn through that experience, through those challenges? And was it worth it in the end? You kind of said it was, but was it? Why was it worth it? What type of financial gains actually happened there?
Sure. So I think in terms of getting started with it, so we did an inspection. Again, first time I'd ever worked with a home inspector, because I'd only lived in a condo. We'd lived in condos, right? So we'd never gone through that process. And I'm reading the binder, and I don't know what most of this means. I'm not handy. I'm completely useless when it comes to like home maintenance and home renovations. So I remember flipping through this thing. I don't know what a soffit is. I don't know what any of this stuff is. I'm just looking for check marks, and I'm looking for like green and red to tell me how good or how bad is this. And I reached out to a couple of people. They're like, yeah, it's a triplex, like expect headache. So anyway, I got them to kind of narrow down, okay, what do we need to fix before we can start placing tenants? We had to renovate the basement. So it was a triplex, but the basement needed work done. I have no idea what it would cost to do that. So we relied on our realtor a lot, and he pointed us to kind of the right tradespeople and connected us to good people. We worked through it. Every year when I did my taxes, and I'm kind of lining up like, okay, the revenues were this in terms of rents coming in, and then all our expenses. I remember we barely paid any income tax on our properties because there were so many expenses. And it wasn't just like the heat, hydro, like it wasn't the usual stuff you expect when you do a pro forma. Like I did, like I'm a numbers guy, so I ran the numbers, like 5%. I think I had a property management fee. I think 7% for kind of just whatever, like repair and maintenance. I had occupancy, like all those things that you're supposed to do when you run a model. But that wasn't our reality. Like I found like every year I was kind of like prepping the spreadsheet for the accountant. There was all these other things that never accounted for. So we had someone called the fire department about our basement, and I had to then put in different doors, and like there was just things to be fixed that cost an extra $8,000. Anuja mentioned the $15,000 staircase outside. Tenants, especially basement tenants, they're going to turn over every year, right? And so you're always going to have that 1 month of vacancy, and then just the effort to place a new tenant. There's always just like fridge busted or like just stuff that breaks, right? And so for me, the buy and hold experience, I'm glad we did it, as we doubled our money in terms of we bought at 263, we sold at 525, and of course, I mean, we're only in for 20%, so it's more than doubling our initial investment. But I think new investors who are kind of really excited to go in, just make sure you know make sure you understand the strategy that you're going for. Are you someone who looks for passive? Is passive better for your lifestyle? Or are you handy and you're willing to take on the challenges of a 100-year-old fixer-upper? We didn't really think that through. Or I didn't really think that through. I'll take the blame there. I just sort of looked at the numbers mainly and just assumed everything else is going to work out. And yeah, there'll be some maintenance. It was way more maintenance than I expected. And even though Hamilton is the house is only 35 minutes away from where we lived, those trips can be just a pain in the butt in terms of having to go to and just dealing with issues and hearing from neighbors that our tenants are doing this. So just be prepared that if you are going to own your own property, and even if you have a property manager or self-manage it, stuff's going to come up. And the numbers that look very shiny in the very beginning, which is going to help you make your decision, reality may not be as smooth as it looks.
So now it sounds very similar to my actual first investment, where it was the money pit, right? So the thing is, you fix everything up and then you sell it, and the next person doesn't have to deal with all of those things that you had to deal with, right? So
yeah.
But yeah, no. It's funny because when you're looking at an investment, it's hard to. Sorry, the rain is getting pretty loud here. But it's hard to take into account all those unforeseen things.
Yep.
So that's something that everyone should try to work into their numbers, especially if they're buying something older.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Well, you guys have really taken off by the looks of it. Like ever since basically when the COVID lockdown and all of that madness started. That seems to be like your like the starting point of your race almost. So tell us, it looks like you guys just excelled through that. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so things changed a bit since 2020. I would say we leveled up a little bit in terms of digging deeper into the real estate investing world. We are not where we want to be. There's lots of people doing lots more than us, but we certainly increased in terms of doubling down on real estate. So I, over COVID, did finish my real estate license and was both a full-time high school teacher and a real estate agent doing that at the same time. Things got busy, and since then I ended up retiring or resigning from my career and leaving that career that I did for 17 years. So that's a lot. It was, I mean, I sort of described me being so risk averse. And again, David was the one who helped convince me. I had a lot of, I hate to get cheesy a little bit, but self-limiting beliefs, right? About, am I going to be able to do this? I'm leaving this really secure job that I love for a little bit of an unknown. And certainly we're in an interesting time to leave my full-time career and dig into real estate in Ontario. But at the same time, it has been a really huge growth experience. And, when I don't look back by any means, but it was a really big change. We bought 4 properties over COVID. So we bought a pre-construction in Toronto and bought a rent-to-own property for ourselves where we're the investors. And then also have 2 more properties that we bought buy and hold investments in Cornwall. So in the last couple of years have continued to invest. We have 2 young kids, and so finding ways to do these things while parenting has been really interesting. But it's been a busy few years. David started Rent to Grow Homes, which he can talk a little bit about. But I would just say that we have dug in a little deeper. I think COVID brings that out in people. You start thinking about where you're spending your time and energy, and between our family and real estate investing, those are 2 things that are really important to us. Do you want to talk about Rent to Grow, David?
Yeah, let's hear about Rent to Grow. I see a few cool stuff, a few cool points of what you've done there. So let's hear about that.
Sure. So in 2020, I was with a friend of mine, And we were talking about just kind of catching up over COVID, and realized we had both done real estate investing, and we trusted each other, and we're like, hey, why don't we figure a way to do something together? And so wound up So we looked at pre-con condos, we looked at new developments, tons of things, and didn't find a model that we loved. And then I heard Rachel Oliver on a podcast talking about rent to own, and called her up that night. Kind of got some information. I had read a book about rent to own from Mark Loeffler about 10 years ago, because Mark was our original real estate agent for the Hamilton triplex. So I knew about the concept, loved the idea of win-win-win. I just hadn't taken action. It just hadn't been in my top priorities. But hearing Rachel kind of spur that in me again. So I kind of shared the podcast with my partner, and he and I jumped in and wound up investing in a property in December 2020 in Brampton. And it's honestly been the easiest real estate money we've made. And the reason it's passive. So I went there once, and so it's less than 30 minutes from our house. It's Brampton. We're in Mississauga, house is in Brampton. I went there for the inspection so I could see the place, look at the report. I knew a little bit more about how to read a report, not that much more, but I was a little bit better than I was in 2013. Met the tenant buyers, so I got to know them a little bit more, and am I comfortable with them. Since then, I've never been. Anuja, the realtor, has never been to this property, and every month the rent comes in by e-transfer, and I've never had to deal with a tenant. I've never had to deal with any issues. So it's been literally the easiest real estate money. A total contrast to the description I gave you for our Hamilton triplex. So my partner and I realized, look, Rachel's got a really good business. There are other rent-owned businesses that have these massive investor lists, and it's hard to get on and get a deal with them. So why don't we start our own rent-to-own operating business, because we know friends and family that have HELOCs, that want to invest, that want to be passive, and this would be a good fit. And we're not trying to necessarily build this massive scale business, but if we can get a few deals as a rent-own operator, that would be really interesting. So we hired a coach, someone who I knew who had a lot of experience with rent to own. I think we went in knowing that we know about 60% of what we need to know, because we've gone through it from the investor standpoint. We've been in real estate, we've looked at contracts, but we know there's this 40% gap, and you don't know what you don't know. So we hired a coach to kind of teach us what we don't know, got all the contracts, all the process stuff set up. And then life and other work got in the way. So nothing happened for a year. And then late last year, early this year in 23, I was kind of either let's put a stop to this. We've sunk a little bit of money, but not a big deal. Or we take one final, let's push it. And putting my marketing hat on, that's my background in terms of my main job or my main career. I'm well, where's the right market? Who's the right profile? Asking all those sort of fundamental marketing questions. Anuja and I had bought properties in Cornwall in early 2022. Reason being, she's from Cornwall. We go there for holidays to visit family. And I was shocked at the real estate prices there being actually quite reasonable, and the rent being great so that you can cash flow. So knowing that Cornwall is a cash flow type of community, it works for rent to own. And then looking at the tenant profiles of is there that top 10% of people that need that have decent incomes but need the help with credit scores, improving that, and need time to save down payment? That profile exists there. So went all in on Cornwall as my market. I've been doing radio ads, Facebook ads, reaching out to the networking, reaching out to realtors and mortgage brokers. And for the last little while, we're doing about a deal a month. So it's nice to see some success coming out of that. The summary of rent to own is, so I'm trying to help two groups of people. I'm trying to help the tenant buyers that have good incomes, but cannot get a mortgage today because they don't have the credit score or the down payment. And so by doing a rent to own for, let's say, a 3-year term, we give them that 3-year bridge to help them improve their down payments or their credit score. The other group of people I'm helping are investors. So and really passive investors. Typically, we're often working with first-time, second-time investors that really want to say, David, take my money and give me more money back in 3 years. And our promise to them, and I can't say obviously a guarantee, But the way we kind of structure the deal is that they get 20% annualized return for 3 years, right? So if you put in 100, at the end of 3 years, you'll get your 100 back plus another 60. And so we've done a deal a month for the last 4 months or so. And just nice to have momentum.
Wow, that's impressive. Deal a month for the last 4 months. That's great.
Yeah, it was zero for the longest time, and it was just, again, looking the wrong angles, doing the wrong marketing things, nothing clicked. And then all of a sudden, the right people are hearing about us, the right connections are kind of pushing things our way, and all of a sudden, as you guys know, it's never linear, right? Like it's often the hockey stick curve where you start like flat, then all of a sudden it just takes off. So that's what I'm experiencing now. Again, it's not a scale business. I'm not trying to treat it as one. So I get to be very selective with who I deal with. And I always say my job is risk management. My job is to make sure that I'm reducing the risk for my investor. I'm also reducing the risk for my tenant buyer. And so we're very much tenant first. The first thing is to qualify the tenant, make sure they're the right people, do like a pretty deep vetting process. Once they're vetted and approved by my broker, then we move forward. So that's the biggest component of my job as a rent own operator is risk management.
Very cool. And like, there sounds like there's a lot of work in this. Sorry about the rain behind me, but how do you guys balance, work life with home life? Because that's tough sometimes.
Yeah, it is a lot. I think it's become part of the culture in our house, in terms of like we've taken our kids with us to a rental property, we play a lot of Monopoly, trying to helping them understand. They've come with me to like stage a house, right? Like they're really part of it's part of our household. And I think part of our household is also, we work hard, but also that we're trying to help people. And I think we're trying to teach that to our children, right? So there's a lot of things that we're doing, even in the rent to own. David talked about trying to be helpful and trying to teach the kids that there's a lot of investors doing really amazing things in terms of making money, but there's also people who are really finding ways to help others. And so we're trying to like build that as part of the culture in our house, is that these are exciting things that we get to do. But, one of the easy things being parents of young children is that it's really easy to just work and become co-parents. And so maintaining our relationship as a couple is really important. David and I share an office, which is interesting at times when we're on calls, but we share a space now, and we know what's going on with each other. We have conversations that are not just about hockey and the kids and who's picking them up and what's for dinner. We have conversations about other things like we used to when we didn't have kids. And, so we try to get a date night pretty often. Luckily, both of our parents live really close by and are really active in our lives, but it gives us an opportunity to keep a relationship, to be a couple as well as parents and sometimes business partners. But it's exciting for us. The last 3 years have been really fun. We've done a lot of goal setting. We've talked about where we want to go. We've talked about why are we doing this? I remember it was like 1 a.m. February or something, 2022. And we're both sitting in the office. And David looked at me and he's like, why are we doing this? He was working on rent to own. I was full-time teaching and in the middle of a real estate deal, and he was like, why? And so we had to answer that question for ourselves. It's really easy to put our heads down and just keep working, just do more and more and more. But answering those questions for ourselves and getting aligned on why we're doing this, what's the legacy we're trying to keep for our children, what are we trying, like what's enough money, all those things have been really important questions and exciting ones. Like it's fun and exciting to think about what our future looks like.
I sense you have a few more tips around how you work together and build this together. Well, you said a great point. Like, why are we actually doing this? Because working as someone who does work with my wife pretty directly at times as well, it's not exactly the easiest thing. However, it's got amazing perks, and there's pros and cons. Some of them are amazing perks. We can work at 10 p.m. on things that I wouldn't typically be doing with someone else, but as a con to that same thing, I can work at 10 p.m. on work stuff. That is not probably why we're doing this, right? So how do you balance all that? What are some tips?
I think having some boundaries on like when we work and like knowing each other's work styles. So like I don't mind being the late owl and sort of getting stuff done, whereas Anuja tends to go to bed a bit earlier and then she'll wake up earlier. We have multiple rooms we have 3 rooms in our house with the extra monitor. So for example, for this podcast, she won and she's in the office. I got booted to the basement. And so just being able to balance things like that, even in the house, just like total logistics, I think just figuring out like, hey, what happens when we both have calls, right? Who's going to go where? And I think being flexible with your partner, right? So like I think Anuja touched upon the communication. So we do talk a lot to each other and kind of let each other know what's going on in our day, what's going on in our lives. Hey, do you need sort of a break or do I need a break? So that happens a lot. And then also, I think it's also very easy to just be stuck in your pair. And so she goes out with her friends or I'll go with my friend. Like we encourage each other to go out. Like whenever that opportunity comes up, it's always, yeah, go. Like it's always, the default is yes, go, unless there's a really good reason not to go. And I think that's worked for us, right? Like I think what we're saying are tips that have worked for us. It may not work for everyone else, but I think the gist of it is like be flexible, over communicate. And then I guess the last thing is back off also when you need to. When Anuja was starting her real estate business, one thing I've learned from observing her is that real estate sales and marketing is a huge component of it. I'd never realized that until I saw it firsthand. And my background is marketing, right? So I had so many ideas I wanted to throw her way. I remember writing up documents and like hundreds of ideas on you could grow your business by doing this and this and this. And then one day she just sort of like looked at me just like, I can't do all this stuff. Just back off. And she was right. Like I was totally overwhelming her. And so now I've kind of learned to sort of pick my spots on when I give feedback and how I give feedback.
Yeah. I think I would call David my biggest critic and also my biggest cheerleader. And I think that balance of being both of those things and finding the right ways to do it, which he hasn't always, but, he is able, like I'm able to take, constructive feedback, but he's also, I would still be in teaching if it weren't for him, right? Like I would have never left if I didn't have his confidence in me to push me through, right? To take that risk. I left my pension on the table, right? Like to leave all those things. I needed him to have my back, but I also needed him to like step up and give me the confidence that I was scared, right? It was a big risk for me. And I definitely needed to borrow his confidence for that to happen. But you know what? It's also, we are involved in each other's lives in terms of even business, right? Like I know what's going on and he knows what's going on. And it's a balancing act and it's going to change again as our kids get older. Like there's always this rejigging that continues to happen. But the willingness to work on it and sort of that unity, I think gets us through the tough times, I guess.
That's fantastic.
Also, I'll say her mom, my mother-in-law, still hasn't forgiven me for pushing the career change. I still get looks from her.
But she can obviously see how happy you guys are. So, now Anuja, you're doing the podcast as well, right, with Dan?
Yeah. So, we joined a number of masterminds, which I think if you're an investor and not in a mastermind yet, like get in a group. It was a game changer for us. And so we were in this mastermind called the Cash Flow Crew that Dan started a number of years ago. We were meeting online and I joined in, and it was around the time when I was considering leaving the career. And there was a lot of teachers in that group and it was so supportive. I was so pleased to have the support of that group. But through it, David, our marketer, sort of said, like, you and Dan need to do something. Like you're a good balance. He knows a lot. We have very different paths in real estate. And so, again, with that opportunity to try to help, we started this podcast called Beyond the Bell. You can find us on all the major platforms. And really, we are geared at trying to help teachers who, again, have a similar mindset that in general, a similar mindset that I had, in my career and sort of that, like, we have the pension, we don't need to think about retirement mindset, to try to encourage them to start thinking about doing something outside of that. And, we've had some amazing guests, other teachers who have done some really great things and done different types of investing and different types of, Bitcoin and all these other things that they've been doing. And so Dan and I have had really great feedback from the podcast. And it's been, again, one of those opportunities where it feels like, we're doing some good things in the industry, but also just like helping people. We're getting these messages from people saying, I've listened to, your first 12 episodes this week and I'm really excited to start investing, And so just opening people's minds to the idea that it's not as scary as it could be, and we're doing some education pieces around how do you get the money? How do you place a tenant? What does maintenance look like? And really trying to educate educators on something that they may not have their mind open to yet.
That's very cool. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys coming on today. If I'm sure there's going to be people that want to get in touch with you guys. So how can they do that?
So for David, so my main business is the Rent to Grow Homes. So if you just look up renttogrowhomes.com or info@rent2growhomes, I'm pretty responsive. And Anuja?
Yeah, so I can be reached at anuja@anujapereira.com. And through there, you can find more information about my real estate stuff, the podcast, and some of the work that I'm doing helping with seniors. So trying to help some adult children get their seniors into their parents into the right place. And so lots going on. But feel free to get in touch. And if we can connect you with any of the guests from the podcast, we'll do that as well.
And what area do you cover as an agent?
Yeah, so I'm mostly like Golden Horseshoe. I'm in the Mississauga area, but I've gone pretty far lately for people who need it. My last houses are out like near Aurelia, but you know what? It's mostly around the Mississauga, Toronto, Hamilton, Niagara area.
Okay, very cool. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming on. And Sandy, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, this is great. Appreciate it, both of you. Best way and easiest way to reach me is just find me on social media. It's Sandy McKay @it's Sandy McKay, or if you want to email me, it's sandy@freedomreps.com.
And people can reach me at rob@mrbreakthrough.ca. Again, thanks for listening, guys, and we will hear you and see you next time.